Greetings, my name is Brenda, and my husband Paul is here with me as we share our story. Before diving into the details, let me set the scene for you. The first time I met Paul's parents, Rachel and Julie, it turned out to be far from pleasant. Curious about their reaction? Well, here it goes. "I can't believe you're with Brenda, Paul. She brings absolutely nothing to the table. Working a basic office job? How is she supposed to contribute to a better life for us?" they criticized. Paul stood his ground. "I love Brenda. She's the one I want to be with, and her financial status means nothing to me. I've always told you that." But they were adamant. "We've been clear about our expectations, Paul. If she doesn't have more to offer, we can't accept her as part of our family. You need to find someone else," they insisted. Paul didn't waver. "No, Brenda is the one I've chosen. I had everything planned out for the proposal, and now you've spoiled it." I was shocked throughout this exchange. Paul's intention to propose was a surprise. We had been together for 4 years, and I was hopeful but didn't anticipate such a swift move. But more than that, the way Rachel and Julie reacted was deeply concerning. Paul had prefaced this meeting with a warning. He had told me, "Brenda, your father is a remarkable man, and I know you think highly of my parents. But I must tell you, they're not the kind-hearted people you imagine." "How can you say that about your parents? They must have some good in them, having worked hard to raise you," I naively responded. "You don't understand, Brenda. Yes, they put me through college, which helped me secure a good job, but their actions were driven by selfish motives. They've always wanted me to marry someone wealthy to enjoy a lavish life off my spouse's earnings. They'll be disappointed to learn about your job." I had no idea parents could be so self-centered. My parents were nothing but loving and supportive. Paul, despite financially supporting his parents, maintained a strained relationship with them due to his deep-seated dislike for their behavior. Yet, he couldn't bring himself to completely cut them off, influenced by their constant reminders of the sacrifices they had made for him. My initial encounter with them was eye-opening, revealing their sheer greed. Regardless of their vehement protests, Paul asked for my hand in marriage, and we planned our wedding. Rachel and Julie initially vowed not to attend, showcasing their displeasure. However, Paul, longing for his parents' presence due to his small family circle, managed to persuade them to attend. Their change of heart came when they learned about my family's financial stability. My father was a homeowner with some property. Their attendance, however, was conditional. They made it clear to me, "Brenda, we still don't see this marriage favorably. Paul has done well for himself, and we expected him to aim higher, financially speaking. We wouldn't have bothered if we thought you came from nothing. Thankfully, your father has some assets. Remember our contribution today when you come into your inheritance." On my wedding day, their mention of inheritance was completely out of place. My father was alive and well, making their comments not only inappropriate but also infuriating. I walked away from them, upset. My father was my only family, and their words stung deeply. Their boldness in expecting a share of my finances was astounding. I chose not to burden Paul with this on our special day, knowing how difficult it was for him to distance himself from his parents. Unfortunately, this incident marked the beginning of ongoing tensions. Paul and I were blissfully happy together, but his parents constantly meddled in our financial affairs, incessantly inquiring about my father's wealth. We never indulged their curiosity, which only led to more pestering. Their behavior was not just embarrassing but blatantly entitled, demonstrating no real reason for them to be privy to my father's financial situation. Finding myself in a state of profound grief after my father's untimely departure, barely 4 months post-diagnosis, the pain was unbearable. Witnessing his health fade, I was faced with the inevitable, yet accepting his loss was a battle of its own. Throughout this challenging period, Paul stood by me, offering unwavering support. He was my pillar, accompanying me to my father's hometown for the funeral arrangements. Meanwhile, Rachel and Julie's insensitivity knew no bounds. They incessantly bombarded me with calls and messages, intrusively inquiring about the inheritance and the financial details of the funeral arrangements. Both Paul and I were appalled by their behavior, yet we chose to hold off on confronting them until after the funeral. True to expectation, upon our return home, Rachel and Julie wasted no time in invading our space, eagerly pressing us for details about the inheritance. Now that the funeral's done, we're eager to know about the inheritance. He surely left you the house, didn't he? Julie probed, her curiosity unchecked. Her question left me aghast. Why would my inheritance be of any concern to you? I retorted, shocked by her audacity to broach such a topic fresh off my father's funeral. Oh, come off it, Brenda. Ever since Paul chose you, we've been puzzled. With your average job and lacking any notable beauty, what did he see in you? We assumed it must be the money, Julie bluntly speculated. Paul, equally offended, leaped to my defense. What is wrong with you? How dare you insult my wife and our love like that? I've repeatedly told you that our marriage was built on love, not material interests. Show some respect, especially today. Julie, undeterred, persisted. There's no need for drama, Paul. We're just asking. If Brenda answers, it'll satisfy our curiosity. Honestly, if you married her for money, we'd be relieved to know you've secured a significant advantage. Their words were a glaring reflection of their priorities, showcasing a blatant disregard for our feelings and the sanctity of our relationship. Accusing your son of marrying for money is beyond appalling. It's hard to fathom how someone as kind-hearted as Paul could emerge from such cruel intentions. Drop the act, Brenda. We've been eagerly anticipating the details of your inheritance. Your father must have left you something significant. Paul mentioned he owned a sizable property. Why not disclose it now and consider using it to secure a house for us? We'd make good use of it, considering we're essentially your family now. Their words ignited a fury within me while Paul stared at his parents, shocked by their blatant greed and selfishness. The ink on my father's death certificate had barely dried, and here they were, shamelessly eyeing my inheritance for their gain, audaciously labeling themselves as my new parents. It was clear that a stand needed to be taken, not just for my sake, but to reveal the extent of their greed to Paul. I responded calmly, yet with a firmness intended to set the record straight. Actually, the house wasn't in my dad's name at the time of his passing. Yes, he once owned it, but due to circumstances, he had to relinquish ownership. Their response was as vile as expected. So you mean to tell us he lost ownership of the house? That he essentially left nothing behind? Their scorn continued. Oh, so your father was destitute after all? It's clear now why you could never belong to wealth. He couldn't even maintain ownership of his house. Such a shame, dying without a roof of his own. Paul, appalled, intervened. Enough. Our commitment to each other isn't voided by the absence of an inheritance. Brenda's value to me isn't tied to her financial status. You can't just demand she leave over this. This confrontation laid bare the depth of their materialism and insensitivity, underscoring a moment of truth about the values that truly mattered in our lives together. In an utterly unreasonable outburst, Paul's parents declared they wouldn't let him continue his marriage with me, citing disappointment for him marrying into what they considered a financially modest family. They accused me of entrapping their son for financial gain, vowing to prevent me from allegedly isolating Paul from his wealth. Rachel and Julie escalated their tactics, pressuring Paul to divorce me and insisting he marry someone wealthy to afford them a luxurious lifestyle. Witnessing Paul's frustration and emotional turmoil, I knew it was crucial to confront the situation head-on. I urged Paul to reflect on the extent of his parents' manipulative behavior, questioning if he was willing to allow their greed to dictate our future. Paul, will you let your parents' obsession with wealth destroy us? I've silently endured their accusations to avoid causing you guilt for distancing yourself from them. Can we allow them to remain a part of our lives after this? Paul reached his breaking point, acknowledging the toxic influence his parents had exerted over him. Enough is enough, he declared. Mom, Dad, your actions today have revealed the extent of your selfishness. You've exploited my efforts to fulfill your materialistic desires for years. I cannot accept this any longer. His parents desperately tried to justify their demands, claiming their interference was for Paul's good and that he owed them for their financial support over the years. They urged him to divorce me and pursue a wealthier partner, promising their assistance to avoid further mistakes. Paul, however, stood firm in his decision, refusing to abandon our marriage based on financial pretenses. I will not divorce Brenda simply because she didn't receive an inheritance. I'm tired of being manipulated by your greed. From now on, you are no longer a part of my life, he affirmed, choosing our love and integrity over his parents' materialistic demands. Facing the relentless disapproval from Rachel and Julie, they challenged Paul's decision to stay married to me, warning him of imagined dire consequences. They doubted my worth and anticipated my betrayal, which they believed would lead Paul to financial ruin. Amidst their unrelenting criticism, I decided it was time to unveil my actual financial status. This revelation, I hoped, would not only silence them, but also ensure Paul felt confident in his choice. "There's no need for concern," I calmly informed them. "I'm not interested in Paul's money. I have my financial resources, more than enough to support both of us." Their skepticism was palpable. "Stop pretending, Brenda. We're not fooled. We know you don't have the means," they retorted, convinced of their narrative that I was after Paul's wealth, driven by desperation and deceit. To their disbelief, I clarified, "Actually, I am not in need. My bank account holds $65 million, a legacy from my father, not through my job, but a direct inheritance." Their denial was instant. "That's impossible. You said your father left nothing behind," they argued, convinced I was attempting to deceive them. Yet, Paul signaled me to proceed, fully aware of the truth. Upon showing them my bank balance, their skepticism turned to shock. They couldn't believe their eyes, insisting, "This can't be real. You must have falsified these records." They questioned the source of my wealth, given my earlier statement about my father's assets. "I omitted a detail," I explained. "My father owned a large ranch where he lived. He sold the ranch and the house before his passing, giving me an early inheritance. He chose to enter hospice on his terms, not wanting me to bear the financial burden of his care. Unlike you, he valued my well-being over his financial legacy." This revelation was intended not just to silence their greed, but to highlight the stark difference in values between us and them, affirming our unity and resolve against their materialistic intrusions. Rachel and Julie were visibly shaken and skeptical, unable to reconcile the reality before them with their preconceived notions. They turned to Paul for confirmation, and upon his affirmation, a brief silence fell. Then, as if on cue, their attitudes took a swift turn. They praised the situation, lamenting their previous doubts and proclaiming their newfound joy over my financial standing. "What wonderful news! We were so worried, but it turns out our son chose wisely. Brenda, you really should have shared about your wealth earlier." they effusively stated, attempting to rewrite the narrative as if they were always on our side. Paul's face told me everything I needed to know. He was ready to address the situation, and I trusted him to speak for both of us. His frustration erupted into a demand for an explanation from his parents, incredulous at their sudden shift from antagonists to would-be allies, simply because money was now in the picture. "How can you even think of acting like family now, after everything you've said and done?" he challenged them. Their defense was flimsy, claiming ignorance due to my supposed secrecy about my financial situation. "We didn't know she was wealthy. Had we known, our reactions might have been different," they weakly argued, hoping for a quick resolution and forgiveness. But Paul was resolute, his decision unwavering. "No, this is unforgivable. You've shown your true colors, prioritizing money over genuine concern and empathy. Right after Brenda's father's funeral, instead of offering support, you saw an opportunity to benefit yourselves. That's inexcusable." He continued, setting a clear boundary. "Your actions today have made it clear that we need to protect our peace and well-being from your toxicity. Leave our home and do not expect any assistance from you moving forward. From now on, you're on your own." In this moment, Paul stood firm, prioritizing our dignity and the sanctity of our marriage over his parents' manipulative behavior, marking a decisive end to their undue influence in our lives. Paul made it clear that there would be no further financial assistance from use to his parents, stating they had forfeited any right to support given their actions. This announcement triggered an explosive reaction from Rachel and Julie, who shifted from anger to desperation, pleading not to be cut off from our lives. However, their pleas fell on deaf ears, especially with Paul, whose patience had worn thin to the point where he warned of involving the police should they refuse to leave our premises. This ultimatum spurred their departure, though they persisted in bombarding us with calls and messages, prompting us to block their numbers and caution them against further harassment, under threat of legal action. In the days that followed, Paul took the lead in handling the fallout with his parents, allowing me the space to mourn my father. It was a time of reflection, reminiscing about the cherished moments spent with him. My father's foresight and selflessness were evident in his decision to sell his property, ensuring I wouldn't be burdened, and even covering his hospice care with the proceeds, embodying the epitome of parental love. Meanwhile, Paul navigated his form of loss, grappling with the severance of ties with his family. Although it was a liberation from their toxicity, he faced criticism from some quarters for his stance. However, sharing the full extent of their behavior turned the tide of opinion against Rachel and Julie, leaving them isolated in their disgrace. Despite our efforts to cut contact, including changing our locks, their attempts to reach out persisted, leading us to consider legal restraining orders as a final recourse. Amidst these tumultuous times, we discovered the joyful news of my pregnancy. While it's bittersweet that my father won't be here to share in this new chapter, the anticipation of welcoming our child has brought Paul and me closer, filling us with excitement and hope for the future. Together, we're looking forward to embracing the joys of parenthood and cherishing every moment of this unexpected blessing.